movies from various genres and decades. Stay tuned for this episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of now called the MovieNauts. As it's not just one of us, it's all of us. This time we're going to talk about our favorite horror icons. 5 movies from them, and we're going to let Bill start us off.
Okay, my favorite movie icon, and I have a shirt to prove it, is Bela Lugosi. I will not be talking about Dracula this time. I think we covered Dracula in a previous episode anyway. So I'll go chronologically again. One of the early Bela Lugosi movies is Murders in the Rue Morgue from 1932. And sometimes I choose my movies because I have a story. So I have a story.
Okay.
Everybody talks about, Dracula brought Universal back from the dead, and then they wanted to do a follow-up and do Frankenstein. And Bela Lugosi was supposed to play the monster in Frankenstein, and Robert Florey was actually supposed to be the director. Robert Florey is another French expressionist director. Things changed. James Whale did a really successful version of what was that movie? Riverboat. He did a really successful version of Riverboat. They wanted to give that movie to if you know what, it wasn't Riverboat. That comes later. It was actually Waterloo Bridge. Excuse me. Anyway, it was really successful. They wanted to give Frankenstein to James Whale, and Bela Lugosi read the script for Frankenstein, and he said, "There's no lines. I don't like this. I want something else." So they've been given what has been termed as the booby prize of Murders in the Rue Morgue. So it gets kind of a bad rap. It's not as popular as it used to be. But if you really watch it, it's not a bad movie. It's actually pretty gosh darn good. Bela Lugosi is at his over-the-top best. I call him the William Shatner of his day for the overacting that he does. He's really over the top. He plays a mad scientist who's looking at Darwinism and trying to mate a gorilla with women, and he usually finds prostitutes and is kidnapping them and trying to mix their blood together to mate them together. Not actual sex going on because it's the 30s. It is pre-code though, so it's still pretty advanced for its time. So he's trying to prove Darwinism and all this by doing this, and he's killing these prostitutes to do this. And it's really, it's not bad. It's not as good as Frankenstein. No, it is. It's not going to match up to that. That one's a classic.
Right.
But it gets that bad rap for having all these people who were supposed to be involved with Frankenstein getting shoved into Murders in the Rue Morgue. But I think it's worth sitting through. It's only about an hour and 2 minutes. There's worse things you can do with that amount of time.
True.
It's not a bad flick. It's worth checking out for sure. So that's my first movie. And of course, Poe adaptation, which they don't actually even go into the story that Poe wrote until way towards the end of the movie. About the last 15 minutes of the movie kind of covers that. But it's kind of like the Corman Poe classics where they they kind of took it in a different direction, right? They're only short stories. If you only did the short story, it'd be maybe 20 minutes. So,
Right.
They're basically as suggested by.
Yeah, that's probably an accurate one for this one as well, as suggested by. They took it in a different direction, trying to, drag it out for an hour to an hour and a half, all those movies. But so anyway, Murders in the Rue Morgue, directed by Robert Florey, who goes on to direct a whole bunch of Alfred Hitchcock Presents episodes and things like that. So he's not a bad director either. I think he's really good. So that's my first one, Murders in the Rue Morgue.
Sounds good.
Okay, well then I'm up, and I thought about this for a while, and I was trying to come up with somebody who was sort of outside the box for my icon to choose. And I thought of Jeffrey Combs. unfortunately, I'd covered some of his movies that I really like, so it was like, and that would be repeats. And Linnea Quigley, sort of the same sort of thing. It's like, so I ultimately went a sort of completely different direction and went with Stephen King. Stephen King is absolutely a horror icon.
Yeah.
He's not considered an actor. In the movies I'm going to cover, he's in every single one of them, although it's some really small parts in a lot of them. But I figured it fits horror icon, and you'll notice the Pennywise T-shirt. But I'm not doing it because I haven't seen the second version of it, which he's in. Um, but I just figured it would be a fun one to go with, and I'm going to start with I think probably his best role in a horror movie, Creepshow, where he plays Jordy Verrill. And you know what? I love anthology movies because here's the thing I like about them. If you don't like one of the stories, there are still more stories. And I like the way Creepshow is done up as a comic book. And the crate is amazing. But the one that King is in is hilarious and creepy too. It's sort of like a redo of the Blob, where this meteor crashes and he goes and sticks it with a stick, which I mean, it seems like everybody in these movies do that. And it goes up the stick and gets on his arm and starts infecting him and growing in his house. And you know, there's a famous line, Jordy Verrill, you lunkhead, and it's a fun movie. It's creepy and I love how they do the animation stuff with it. And it's an absolute classic. Funny thing is, it's based on a fictional comic book called Creepshow, but they've actually put out some Creepshow comic books. One came out last Halloween, and I picked it up at the store. Um, so it's kind of like art becoming reality, I guess.
Right.
So yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's one I revisit a lot, and it never gets old, really.
No,
So Stephen King's kind of doing that Hitchcock thing, doing the
Exactly.
cameo real quick in a lot of these, which
yep.
is pretty cool. I didn't realize he did that. I knew he was in some of them, but I didn't realize he did it that frequently.
And I don't even think with Hitchcock it was Hitchcock's thing. I mean, Hitchcock did it in a couple movies, and then it was like everybody expected it. And I heard I think his daughter talking about it, and she said that he got to where he hated that because he had to come up with a way to put himself in and not be noticeable and take away from the movie. So
Yeah.
he started putting it like a really tiny part in the beginning. But
Yeah,
it's not like Stephen King is the director on these. I think these directors or producers just go, yeah, let's do Stephen in here.
Right. Right.
right. Yeah, the later movies, Hitchcock does it real early in the movies just to
Oh yeah,
get it out of the way so people will watch the movie and not concentrate on where is he.
exactly.
All right. Well, my first one is, and I always mess up this the way it's the abominable Dr. Fives from 1971.
Because you picked Vincent Price.
Vincent Price, of course. Uh, I for this one, I saw this at a very early age, and it always stuck with me as one of my favorites as a child. And then for the longest time, I hadn't seen it, and then when it got on that Vincent Price Blu-ray box sets that they put out a few years back, I got it and it was on him. I was like, oh, great, this is fantastic. But it's an obvious tongue-in-cheek horror movie, and Vincent Price's character, Dr. Fives, um, he blames the doctors for his wife's death. As he's rushing home, he supposedly gets into a car accident, and they thought he was dead, but he wasn't. He put himself back together physically, and then with his voice plugged into the pipe organ, which was hilarious. And he starts using the old curses from the biblical times to kill out each one of the doctors, and it's just every time I see it, I just crack up at just how it's it's absurd, but it's like in the most fun way possible. Um, uh, and and just how his voice. I mean, this is one of the horror icons that his voice is just so recognizable that you can close your eyes and he'll speak and you know who it is. And it just and for what I read that his accent is based on an old accent called the transatlantic, where it's combining British and American accent together to be mostly for dramatic effect, not so much to be anything else. So this one, I mean, it just from a kid, I think around 8 or 9, I saw it on a Sunday morning matinees. It was like at around 11 o'clock on TV, and watched that every time it came on when they announced it's coming on, and I was like, oh, yes, I go watch it again. I think that's probably one of my most watched movies as a child.
Yeah, that is a good one. That is a fun movie. Yeah, that transatlantic accent was an old Hollywood thing because they wanted to appeal to both American and British audiences because we were still getting a lot of our art from Britain. So that goes all the way back to the earliest
It
talk.
was not really, nobody really spoke that accent.
No,
It was
you had to learn it.
in a school in Hollywood.
Yeah, it was Hollywood was it. They learned it. It was a taught accent, which is in a way kind of cool, but today maybe some audience might find it hokey, but
yeah.
Vincent Price was actually probably the perfect one to speak that because he was born in St. Louis and growing up, he spent a lot of time in England. So he did kind of have both of those accents growing up.
Right.
So probably came fairly natural to him, I bet.
Yeah, and it's just and him reading Poe is like, I mean,
yeah.
I don't think anyone has ever done it as good as him. I mean, he just.
I could listen to him read a phone book and be entertained.
Yeah. He basically,
he's got one of the greatest voices in Hollywood history. Just it's so distinguishable.
Oh yeah.
Patrick Stewart's another one. I could listen to him read anything.
He is, yeah. He's probably one of the only new guys that has that kind of voice. One of the newer actors, anyway, the last 20, 30 years that really has a voice like that. Yeah,
and this one, it was on DVD for the longest time, and then came out on Blu-ray in 2013, and then Arrow put this one and the sequel together in 2014. But I never got that one, so I got the very out of order Vincent Price box sets, the 3 volumes. This one is on one volume, and the sequel's on a different volume. I was kind of hoping that be back to back, so I could watch them back to back that way instead of taking out a disc and putting back in.
Well, they wanted you to buy it. They wanted you to buy both sets.
Exactly. Yeah, they knew I was going to buy it.
I've read before too that Fives was supposed to be a whole series, but they only got around to making the 2 movies.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that supposed to be a lot more. That's why they never catch him in the end.
Exactly.
Not to give out the spoiler, but
Yeah, when I talk about the second one, I'll tell you the titles that they had proposed for a third one.
I will say this: I saw a little interview with Vincent Price's daughter, and she said that was one of his favorite roles. He loved that role.
There's one that he did afterwards that kind of was reminiscent of it, but it was more modern day. Was Theater of Blood.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It was kind of reminiscent of it, but it was just more modern time.
Theater of Blood might be my favorite Vincent Price movie, actually. I love that.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's my first one. The Abominable Dr. Fives from 1971.
Okay, so my second feature is we're still in the early days of Lugosi, where he's still doing actually good films. We'll get to the schlocky stuff soon enough.
I hope
But
Nine
one of
is
my
funny.
all-time favorite Lugosi movies, after Dracula, of course. Oh, sure. Um, is The Black Cat. A lot of people say White Zombie is his second best movie, or maybe even his best, better than Dracula. The one that I think rivals Dracula is The Black Cat.
Well, that's a great movie.
It is. It stylistically, it's incredible. It encompasses modernism perfectly with Boris Karloff's house. And it's the one where Karloff and Lugosi play chess against one another. I mean, how much of an iconic scene is that? And Bela Lugosi actually plays the protagonist, the Karloff's satanic antagonist. So he gets to play the good guy.
Oh, wow.
Karloff does still get top billing, but it's still pretty equal billing at this point. Later on, Karloff would overtake. They did what, about 7 or 9 films together, something like that. But I think this is their best pairing, in my opinion, because they're really treated as true equals on both sides of this. The plot is Lugosi meets a young couple on a train who are going to a country in Europe anyway. I think it's one they made up, actually. But anyway, Lugosi's coming back, returning to this area. He was in war, and during the war, Karloff actually stole Lugosi's daughter and married her. And you almost get the feeling that he like took over her mind somehow, or hypnotized somehow, or something. So he's out for revenge. He's out for total, full revenge on Karloff. Just wants to really do him in. And Karloff actually, and his character is satanic in this modernist home and everything. And the young couple winds up there with him as well, finding in there. And Lugosi actually does have this dreadful fear of a black cat that Karloff has living in his home, which is our tenuous connection to the original Poe story that this supposedly originates from. I guess inspired by, maybe the better term once again, because this one has even less to do with the Poe story than my previous pick of Murders in the Rue Morgue. But still a great movie. I think one of the best. And also, I should mention, it is directed by one of my all-time favorite. Okay, my favorite director is James Whale and Roger Corman. Those two are tied. But somewhere in that top 5 favorite directors, anyway, of mine, would be Edgar G. Ulmer, who directs this. And it's his only major production. He only did one movie for any of the major studios, and this is it. And it's interesting because I'm a really old classic film buff. When I held on to cable for about 5 years because I still only watched Turner Classic Movies, was the only channel I couldn't lose. And I watched it incessantly. And even when you watch those old cheapy movies, those Poverty Row things, when it was directed by Edgar G. Ulmer, they were always a step above the rest. Really, really good films. Another one of his best was Detour, which he also did for PRC, Producers Recording Company. And many could point to that as one of the all-time great film noirs of all time. And it has nobody of any stars in it, but it's just a great noir. Just anytime you watch any of the Edgar G. Ulmers, they're kind of like that. They're kind of just that one step above any of these other cheapy movies that are mostly pretty rotten, actually. But his were more logically put together, better shot. He just had a flair for this. And I've seen some interviews with him as well, and he was like he was kind of an independent kind of guy. Didn't like really the big studios controlling him anyway. So kind of worked out for him anyway. So anyway, The Black Cat, another one, highly recommended without the irony. Great film if you haven't, for anyone who hasn't seen it or just wants to revisit it again and maybe forgot about it.
Sounds good.
Okay, well, that brings us back to me. And I mentioned when we were talking about the Hitchcock thing that Stephen King, difference being Stephen King didn't direct the movies. This one he did, I believe. He certainly wrote it, and a lot of people hate it. I think it's a fun movie, Maximum Overdrive, where all the machines start coming to life and trying to kill people. And Stephen King's cameo in that one, by the way, is a guy at an ATM when the ATM is just completely melting down on him. But supposedly he was really, really deep in his cocaine habit at the time.
Yes.
And so it's sort of deep in that. And it is a little over the top, a little cheesy in some ways, but it's such a fun movie. And the soundtrack is AC/DC. I mean, how can you really go wrong? It's kind of like one of my favorite short stories of his is The Mangler, where this machine that's designed to press fabric goes nuts and starts killing people. And this is like that in overdrive because all the machines are coming alive.
Right.
And it's a very fun movie. Oh, and you got the truck with the Green Goblin on the front of it, which is iconic, absolutely iconic. So yeah, what a great movie.
You are right about that soundtrack. One of my all-time favorite movie soundtracks of any kind. Was that his directorial debut? Was that the first one he directed?
I think that's the only one he's directed.
The only one? Okay.
Because I think he had such bad response to it that I think he was like, no, this was a bad idea. Personally, I don't think it was a bad idea. I think he did a good job. Maybe it's also possible that he just hated doing it.
Yeah.
Right.
I was wondering what the story was behind that because I did wind up watching that not too long ago, actually. And, I had no idea even it just came on and then directed by Stephen King. Like, really?
Yeah.
But yeah, it wasn't a bad film, though. It's
and
fun
little one of the few that he actually wrote the screenplay, too.
Yeah. Now you did do more than one where he wrote the screenplay, at least.
Right. I think he wrote the screenplay for the Shining miniseries, which I talked about in the previous episode, which is
right.
I was tempted to put that one in, but that would have been a repeat, so I didn't. But yeah.
Well, there's a kind of a remake of Maximum Overdrive called Trucks.
Oh, that's what the story that he
was called. That's what it was actually called.
I have not seen the remake.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either. I keep on seeing that whenever I go looking for movies online, and I keep on seeing that, and it's like, one of these days, I think I'm gonna just bite the bullet and buy it, to kind of compare the two,
I'm tempted now too that I know it exists.
Yeah, I think it's only on DVD, and I hope it's still in print.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so that was a good choice. And I agree. A lot of people, say bad things about it, but something, if you step back and think of it as a fun movie, then you're fine. If you're going in thinking it's going to be a serious horror movie, you're going to be very disappointed.
It's a very fun movie.
Yeah.
High energy and just a good time.
Oh yeah.
Come on, if the soundtrack is AC/DC, it has to be a high energy movie.
Right.
And I may be wrong, but I think Stephen King might have invented that subgenre of vehicles coming to life. It was Christine, and I don't know if anything.
No, there was the car, which I really think Stephen King probably I think it inspired Stephen King to write Christine, because the car was definitely before that.
Around 1971, roughly.
Yeah, and it's a
71. 71.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been a while since I've seen that. I think what was that with James Brolin?
Yes, I own that one on Blu-ray. We just watched it a couple months ago.
Yeah, I gotta get that one. All right. Well, I'm going to come back with the sequel to Dr. Phibes called Dr. Phibes Rises Again with an exclamation point. this time he comes back. It was like a few years later, and he comes back, and uh, both of them have um, kind of biblical things going on about them. This one, he's towards the end, he wants to get the eternal river of life uh, that's in Egypt, and so he can bring back his beloved Victoria. And this is what is always the way he says her name. It's like he's like over accentuating, just so dramatically saying that her name, like Victoria, like this is his goddess, basically,
Like
and
it's the angelic choir singing it.
yeah, and what is what is really cool about this one is they had a bit slightly bigger budget. Um, so some of the death scenes were a little bit more, more involved. And then he hooks up with this one guy named Darius Bierbeck. Bierbeck. Had to read that. He had lived for centuries, this particular guy, and he's coming up towards the end of his days. And when he finds out about the river of life, he tries to trick Fives at every, it's like they were constantly at it with each other. And towards the end, it was kind of a bittersweet thing for him. He didn't make it. Fives went through those kind of pearly gates to the afterlife. I'm having a feeling that it could be the river Styx, but I'm not sure. They didn't really say anything, but I like them both equally. I couldn't say one's better than the other. If you watch the first one, you most definitely have to watch the second one to see it. And like you were saying earlier, there was supposed to be a third one, and it just for many reasons it never got made. And API had solicited scripts, and they had titles. Here's a cool one: Fives Resurrectus, the brides of Dr. Fives, and my favorite one, The Seven Fates of Dr. Fives. Now that is an awesome title.
It is.
That one right there, out of all of even the two that were made, that's an awesome title. So it's like, I don't remember exactly why he didn't do it. Maybe just you wanted to move on to other things, but I really think that this would have been, because I know Theater of Blood came out in '73. This was '72. So, and back then in the '70s, they were making the movies rather quickly, sometimes almost back to back.
Especially at AIP.
Yeah, and I always thought that if anyone's going to do a remake, which I'm not 100% fond of, a Dr. Fives remake, but they got to do it. I would prefer that they use practical effects instead of CGI, because I think it will take away from the whole thing. It's supposed to be taking place in the 20s, and the 20s, didn't have that look.
I say instead of doing a remake, just do those other three films.
Yeah.
I think that would be great if they were going to do this, make those other three films.
Yeah, but I think they would, obviously since he's not with us anymore, but they would just so it kind of get someone that can have that, maybe not a replacement, but someone that's, that can pay homage to Price.
Right, certainly.
So at one time I had thought, but I hadn't seen this actor in a very long time. Was Jeffrey Rush, because he did that the House on Haunted Hill. He did that, and he even had like the little paper thin mustache that Price had and everything. And I thought that he would have been pretty good to do it, but it's his time is basically you need someone that's not young, but someone that's definitely not old. But yeah, they could do those. They could do those, or maybe just do just a complete remake, or a reboot or whatever, something like that. Just saying that he's been gone for over a century and he got awoken, but because of that time lapse, he maybe didn't age well. So have a different actor to make up for that. But that's my second one from the legendary Vincent Price.
Those five films are a lot of fun. I mean, they're really, like you said, tongue in cheek too. They're pretty funny too.
Oh,
All right, so my next one, I had to go with at least one comedy. The obvious would be Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, where Bela Lugosi revitalizes his Dracula role. But I did not want to go with that one. I wanted to dig a little deeper because we are supposed to be doing cult. So I went with The Gorilla, which Bela Lugosi is in this. It's one of his butler roles that he usually, modern audiences don't like him in the butler roles because he's kind of wasted. But one thing that we should remember is when Bela Lugosi's playing the butler, it's because he's supposed to be a red herring. He's supposed to take your eyes off of who the real killer is, right? Everybody's expecting the killer to be Bela Lugosi. So, and then the old adage, the butler did it. I don't know, maybe that came from Lugosi. I'm not sure. I don't know. I could be wrong about that, but it at least enhanced that aura, though, of the butler permeating the crime. The comedians in this one are actually the Ritz brothers. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Ritz brothers. They're pretty hokey. There's three of them. Kind of took some of their act from kind of a combination of the Marx Brothers and the Three Stooges kind of a thing. They're really not bad, though. I think they're pretty funny. One of them was actually very good friends with Mel Brooks, if that's anybody's, little trivia piece there. But one thing that I think is a standout of this movie, and actually she steals the movie from the Ritz brothers, is Patsy Kelly. She is hilarious. She outdoes them in every scene. I don't know if she ad-libbed some of those lines to do that. I wouldn't be surprised if she did. Most people don't remember Patsy Kelly, or if you do, horror fans might remember her from Rosemary's Baby. She was actually one of the women in there doing a serious role, not doing her comedy shtick. But in her heyday, she was part of a comedy team with Hal Roach, who did The Little Rascals and Laurel and Hardy. And she was supposed to be part of a comedy team. She had two partners. One was, and I had to write these down, yes, but I do love them. Zasu Pitts and later on Thelma Todd were her two partners. And I've seen at least some of their short subjects that they did together, and they really hold up. I mean, they really are a female version of Abbott and Costello kind of a thing. And I think they're worth searching out. There are a number of them on YouTube for those who want to seek out those comedy teams. And, why not a female comedy team from the 30s and 40s? I say, go for it. So anyway, she really steals this thing, as far as I'm concerned. It's another movie that's only about an hour. Of course, you do have a gorilla. You have a haunted mansion. The Ritz brothers are there to try and solve the crime. There's murders. There is Lionel Atwill also comes in this thing. So really, it is a cheapie poverty road movie. But, and then you have a gorilla running around, creating havoc, murder mystery, trying to solve it. So it's another fun little movie. Lugosi doing the red herring thing as the creepy butler. But that's my third movie, The Gorilla, with the Ritz brothers top billing and Bela Lugosi. Patsy Kelly steals it.
Cool. Okay, well, for my third, Ryan, you just did a sequel. I'm going to do a sequel, Creepshow 2, which, I I wouldn't say it's as good as the first Creepshow, but it's very close. And again, there are a couple stories that stand out. The Raft is one of them. And the one that Stephen King does a little cameo in as a truck driver, the hitcher or hitchhiker, is probably the classic one. Thanks for the ride, lady. You know,
Right.
you just cannot beat that one. But the Raft is awesome too. And the Raft is another one that you see in a lot of memes these days. But
Oh yeah.
yeah, Creepshow 2, I think it's very nearly as good as the first one. It's very, very good.
That's a good follow up to it, really.
Now, I guess there's a third. I haven't seen the third.
Don't even bother.
That's what I thought. Since you don't really hear anything about it.
It just it was done in the 90s, and it kind of lost that. I don't know. The two creep shows had that 80s vibe, and it had like almost timeless. And this one only kind of sounded like it worked for the time that it came out. And I saw it on YouTube, and I was like going, well, I'm definitely not going to buy this one. I think they said a lot of people were saying, if anything, if you wanted a perfect thing for a third one, and it's not even creep show, is the Tales from the Dark Side movie, because they said it's more in line with the creep show movies, first two. So that's another one I got, the creep show too. All right. Well, for my second one,
Third.
my third one, excuse me, my third and fourth one have similar themes, but the first one, from 1968, Witchfinder General, and it was also released as The Conqueror War, which no idea why they did it like that, but I guess they were trying to.
British title for some
Yeah.
reason. Conqueror.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly why, but for some reason that was the British title.
Yeah, and here obviously, he's going around seeking witches, which you find out that he's only doing it for the money. He probably doesn't believe any of what he's saying. He just, he goes town to town, riles up the town's people, and singles out people he thinks are witches, and they I don't think they burn at the stake, but they
I think they do at least a few of them, yes.
Yeah, and they put them in that rack, and people throwing vegetables at them and things, and I think it was based on a historical character.
It was
named
yes.
Matthew Hopkins.
Matthew
Hopkins.
I was going to say that when you said he does it just for the money, he also does it for the power and just straight up for the cruelty itself. He likes the cruelty.
Yes. Yeah. And
that might be Vincent Price's most evil character ever. I mean, he's really good in that one.
Yeah.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, and I like that it's a period piece in the English Civil War. It's just amazing how things like that were like that, and then got mirrored over here in the early days of our country. Where we had witch trials and stuff. And it was just all pure hysteria, is what it was. But this is another one that I saw very young, and I was trying to look for it on DVD years and years ago, and at the time, all they had in the United States was the title, "The Conqueror Worm," and the Conqueror Worm I think, is a little bit shorter than the Witchfinder General, and so I kind of held out until those box sets when it had it on there. I was like, oh yeah. I mean, I have my best friend from back home that's his favorite Vincent Price movie, and when I told him it's on Blu-ray, he says, "Oh yeah, I'm getting it." I said, "Yeah, but you got to get it with a bunch of other of his movies." I said, "That's okay." So a lot of this time period that he does, from like the late '60s into the early '70s, it there's a vibe about them that it has almost like their classic a classic movie vibe, even though they're horror movies, but because back then they didn't consider horror movies to be classics like we do nowadays, and it's just the amazing thing about that. I just love these movies so much that and for it to be a 1968 film, for the longest time I thought it was a '70s film, and when I found out it was from '68, I was like, oh wow, this is cool for '68. I mean, it's very disturbing too. Besides him being the most evil character, his most evil character, it was quite a disturbing thing. I mean, for that
really
time, for it to be it was a PG movie, and it had a little bit of nudity, but it was like, it wasn't like overboard like horror movies today, but it was just not just for the story, what the story commanded, so to speak. And so that is my third from Vincent Price, Witchfinder General from 1968. That's the version to look for, not the Conqueror.
And I believe the nudity and some of the violence is what they cut out too for the Conqueror Worm.
Yeah,
which I haven't seen it, but that's what I've heard. That's what I've read. Also directed by Michael Reeves, another really good director. He was another student of Roger Corman at AIP. He only did 3 films, and if that movie seems so bleak, that guy committed suicide shortly after that movie.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, brutal, but that guy could have been a great director, I think. I've seen all 3 of his films. That's probably his most polished because he was, getting bigger budgets because they were doing really well.
Right.
But I mean, he could do a lot with very little. His other 2, if anyone's wondering, is The She Beast with Barbara Steele, and The Sorcerers with Boris Karloff, are his other 2. And I think he really does a phenomenal job in all 3. That one actually being the best of the 3, but still.
Right. Yeah. But as a classic, I mean,
really is one of his best.
It's like, if you call yourself a fan of Vincent Price, this has got to be on your list. And if not, then just watch it. I mean, even for the times, and even to this day, it's still rather disturbing. Just in the context of the film, I mean, it's not like a Saw or anything like that, or a Hostel, but it's like it leaves a lot to your imagination as to what's going on, and then just the overall dread you feel for the villages that he visits, as to what's who's going to be a victim.
and he really plays on their fears and everything to get them to go after these witches and stuff. It's really
Yeah.
really a good movie. I really wish Michael Reeves would have lived. I would love to see what else he was going to do with his career. It just makes me wonder. It's one of those things that just makes you go, this guy probably would have been something, would have gone to the majors and done, another version of
Oh,
Godfather or something, something of that level, I feel like.
it's entirely possible. All right. Well, that's my third one.
All right. So some call that I'm going to do a segue here. Some call that one of Vincent Price's more subdued films. And thus far, my three Bela Lugosi movies, he's been a little subdued for a guy who's known for being way over the top.
Right.
Well, let me finally hit one where he goes way over the top. The Devil Bat is one of my favorites, where he's just really out there over the top. It's another one of those Poverty Rows. I believe it's one of his Monogram 9. Which, you know what? We need 6 more people so we can start a softball team or baseball team and call us the Monogram 9. I would love that. Anyway, but the Devil Bat, get a load of this plot. So Vincent Price, I'm sorry, Bela Lugosi is a scientist, a mad scientist who's created an aftershave lotion that this bat that he's developed will attack anybody who wears this aftershave lotion. And it's supposed to be this, phenomenal new lotion that he's going to put out to market, but a lot of the major investors decided not to invest in it. So he keeps giving them his aftershave lotion so that they will get attacked by this bat and die, and that's his revenge. I mean, how can you go wrong with a killer aftershave lotion? I mean, come on. It's really hokey. I keep saying Vincent Price now. Bela Lugosi is really in his over the top best. And if you're a completist, there is actually a sequel without Bela Lugosi. The Devil Bat's daughter is out there. So for a lot of us Lugosi fans, the theory is if you think his movies are bad, you should try any of these. Just imagine any of these movies without Bela Lugosi. Bela Lugosi, The Devil Bat's Daughter, is that film, and you can see just how bad these movies would be without Lugosi. Lugosi's the only reason to watch him. He is a reason to watch him. He's that makes him at least tolerable, if not outright fun. At least fun. If not good, they're at least fun. So this is one of those movies that proves that because it has that sequel without him. And it's just dull and drab and nothing. But anyway, and this also has that iconic scene with, I think it's even a GIF out there with or GIF, however you pronounce it, with the glasses on. He's looking in a window with the flashing lights. Right. That's the movie, The Devil Bat. So that's my fourth one.
All right.
Okay, well, that brings us back to me. And for my fourth movie, I'm going to go with Pet Sematary, which Pet Sematary, I think, has one of the better Stephen King cameos where he plays the preacher at the funeral, which is pretty cool. But the movie, it's just a creepy movie. But I will say something that is going to probably make a lot of people not like me much. I don't think much of the acting is very good in it. Fred Gwynne is amazing, but the rest of the people not so good.
Right.
But the movie works just because the story is creepy and it just works really well, I think.
Yeah, that's one I actually saw in the theater. One of the few Stephen King movies I actually saw in the theater when it first came out.
Uh-huh.
It's brutal, actually. That's one of his more brutal ones. Now that I've seen a lot more.
And little Gage with the scalpel, man.
I know.
Yeah, that definitely burned into my head. Yes.
And when he got, injected with that
no
thing,
fair,
he goes,
no fair.
no fair. Actually, that cemetery is a little bit up down the road.
Oh, seriously?
Really?
Yeah, Mount Hope Cemetery.
That's cool.
Yeah, I've been meaning to. There is, if you ever come to Bangor, there is a Stephen King tour bus,
Nice.
and they go to all the different places that inspired him. When go to the doctor, I go by the drain that inspired it.
Oh, nice.
Really?
Uh,
That would be cool.
and it's not that exciting looking, but it's just this little grid in the ground, and because he said it was the place that was right next to his house, and I was like going, okay, I got to figure out, gave the street names. I go, that's it. I was expecting something little more, like maybe that the city would have put like, here, right here, but no, I think if they did, they probably would have had too many people in that area. But the tour bus goes just about to all the different places in Bangor that the inspiration even goes into to the cemetery and goes to the area where he was doing the sermon for the movie
Nice.
Pet Cemetery.
Well, Bill,
So
I think we need to go visit Ron. What do you think?
I know. Yeah. Sounds like a road trip to me.
yeah,
I actually read an article on Stephen King not too long ago, and they were saying that one of the things he does to come up with his stories is to look at something and say, there's something wrong with that, like a door. Or something.
yeah,
So I can just imagine him looking at that sewer drain and saying, there's something wrong with that sewer drain. And then
yeah,
building a story around that.
yeah. It's kind of cool. I mean,
But Ron,
that's,
the question that's hanging on everybody right now, I'm sure, has to be: have you ever buried anything in that cemetery? And if you did, what
actually
happened?
actually that cemetery doesn't exist per se. There is old pet cemeteries all throughout the state of Maine, but most of them are private. That it's not like something you can get to. It's like
You can get
usually,
to it if you want to.
well, it's like for the neighborhoods that
I'm not
they're
saying to be
in.
legal. I'm saying you could do it.
Yeah, yeah. I forget where the street was. There's that road that the house was on. Is a I think the house is still actually there, and the road. I want to say it's in Cumberland, but I'm not 100% sure. But I'm sure if you go on Google and there is a Stephen King map of Maine
Yeah.
out there, and it shows you all the different places that they're taking place. And I found out there actually is a city called Derry,
Huh.
but Derry is basic. He basically used that as like a group of the different towns in this area to call it Derry. I don't know why he did that, but he did. But, all right.
Well, I'm just saying, I got a dwarf hamster in my freezer right now, waiting to be buried. We could experiment.
Like you said, it doesn't have to be legal, so we just have to go in the middle of the night, which
Just,
all the burials are done in the middle of the night.
yeah, exactly.
How much damage could a dwarf hamster do if this does work out, right?
Right.
Come on, it's only a dwarf hamster. It's only like this big.
Yeah, I have one. I had one. Yeah.
I've had a couple of them too.
All right, my next one kind of follows the same kind of a theme, but it has a more supernatural twist to it, called Cry of the Banshee. It's from 1970. This is another one of my favorites that I grew up with on television, and it's just basically this time we're dealing with an actual witch, not supposed witches. This is an actual witch that curses Vincent Price's family, and it is as disturbing as Witchfinder General, but and it never fails. He always he's not really a bad guy, but it definitely isn't a good guy. Just right there in the middle. I mean, just kind of a typical rich person in the 1600s, that think that they're above it all, and until he tortures the witch, and then the witch puts a curse on him and his family, and brings upon this a banshee, which actually turned out to be working in Vincent Price's The Family Home. He was the best way to describe it is kind of like a sleeper cell. He wasn't he was kind of activated. He was there, but he just was as in his human capacity. But then when the witch activated him, then the beast came out. And as a kid, this was one of the ones that really scared me, because you'd cry at the banshee, and then especially watching it, I watched it at the 11 o'clock matinees, but then one time they played it late at night, and that's when it was scary. I mean, just the whole idea of this thing, and then looking out and it's dark outside, and you're like going, what, what's out there, and I think that's the cool thing about horror movies is when they leave it to your imagination, and they left it to your imagination about the beast until almost the very end, which I guess by today's standards would be a letdown, but you got to remember this is 1970, so they didn't have they didn't have the budget. B, they didn't have CGI to make it all glossy and everything. But that to me is a good thing, because it really was more human. It had a more human element to it rather than just generated from someone's computer. But those are the two I kind of like to say, not sequels to it, but theme-wise, they're sequels. They have like a similar theme to it. So, I think those were his. If I'm not mistaken, there's only two that he dealt with witches and witchcraft. But equally, his character in this one equally as menacing as the one in Witchfinder. That is my fourth one.
Yeah, and I remember hearing that in the late 60s, AIP was trying to do another Poe series, but Corman had already left the studio. They also did The Oblong Box, and The Conqueror Worm was supposed to be part of that, although titled Witchfinder General in America, and then Cry of the Banshee. And I believe Cry of the Banshee is the last of their revitalization of the Poe movies, because it is based off of a Poe, I believe. Is it a poem, or is that a short?
Yeah, it's a little poem.
It is.
It's a little poem, because he reads it, I think, at the end. I think he reads it at the end. No, in the beginning. He reads the poem in the beginning.
Okay.
Because at the end, I just love, he's writing off. He thinks that he's all safe. He's the last one of the family, and he's riding off on his carriage, and it's just going crazy, and he's like yelling to the driver, Billy boy, and it turns out that the banshee kills Billy boy, and he's now controlling the reins. So
it's been a little while since I've seen that one, but it's not bad.
It goes off, the credits start going, and he's still yelling, Billy boy. It's like, oh my gosh. That part was kind of hilarious, because it's like, you're gonna get it, buddy.
Right. Okay, so I guess I'm
Bill,
up.
Bill, let me just say, I sure hope your last movie is Plan 9.
Well, you're close.
Oh, no
It's not about Plan 9. It is an Ed Wood.
Okay.
Oh,
We do have to do Plan 9 at some point, because we haven't talked about that one yet. It is an elephant in the room for these things. But it is an Ed Wood. Towards the end of Lugosi's career, He got addicted to opioids for pain. He winds up in and out of the hospital for opioid addiction. Eventually kicked out of the hospital because he ran out of money to be in the hospital. And the only person who would really work with him was Ed Wood. I believe this is the first movie. Yeah, this is the first movie he did with him. It's actually Ed Wood's first real movie that he directs. Was Glenn or Glenda was the one I decided to go with. The other two, for those keeping score at home, Bride of the Monster, most would say, is probably Ed Wood's most polished film, which is still not to say it's good, but polished at least. And of course, Plan 9, which we definitely do have to talk about one day. But I wanted to do Glenn or Glenda. It's timely because it was supposed to be an exploitation film about the first ever. They actually took this out of real headlines. The first ever transsexual operation took place, and they wanted to exploit this by doing a movie about it and making money off of these exploitation movies. Kind of the way that's where Edgar G. Ulmer went later on in his career with the exploitation racket. Ed Wood was not quite as polished as Mr. Ulmer. He decided to take this in a different direction that the producers didn't really know about and didn't really like when they saw it. He decided to make this his out story for his girlfriend, to tell her that he is in fact a cross dresser at the time termed um, transvestite. So that's where the Angora sweaters come from. Ed Wood actually plays basically himself. Glenda getting the trans operation. They talk with doctors, actors, I guess, playing doctors, but I think they at least got some of the dialogue from real articles from the time. And keep in mind, it is from the time of the 50s, so it is horribly dated. Things that we would laugh at and scoff at today, not really true about what we know about the trans community these days. But it is interesting to see what people thought of with that, pertaining in those times. Bela Lugosi's just thrown in there out of nowhere, has nothing to do with the plot. He's like this philosopher just spouting stuff every once in a while. I don't know what he even has to do with the plot, but it is the one where you get that famous Bela Lugosi line of "Pull the string, pull the string." I don't think he was ever even in the studio with the rest of the actors, as a matter of fact. It's very odd, but that's Ed Wood. It's almost a dreamlike sequence. It's almost on its own level. You would think, honestly, if he was doing this stuff this way on purpose, he would be considered a genius. But because he did this stuff on accident, they think he's terrible. Oh, maybe you can make great art accidentally. I don't know. I mean, there could be an argument for that.
Right.
But anyway, I mean, it's what he does in this film is basically what Orson Welles did with Citizen Kane. Just open up the vein and bleed all over the screen. It's just him. It's throwing it out there, putting his heart on his sleeve, let the chips fall where they may. And you got to admire the guy for that. He had enthusiasm for the genre. So that's my last one, Glenn or Glenda. We definitely have to touch on Plan 9 at some point, though. That's really have to hit that one sooner or later.
Yeah, it's mandatory.
It is. It is. I can't believe we've gone this long, actually.
Yeah, we're closing in on a year, aren't we?
We are. I mean, I did do Ed Wood, the movie Ed Wood, and now I've done another one of Ed Wood's films.
Yeah, so we're getting it.
We'll get it in there one of these days. We'll get it in there one of these days.
Okay, well then that brings us to my last one, and this time I'm going with a mini series, The Langoliers, which is definitely horror, but it's also science fiction, and it is really kind of a tweaked sort of weirdness to it that you just can't get anywhere else about these people on a flight, and something goes horribly wrong, which I'm not going to give away, but there's also a character on there who is just sort of on the edge of nuts to begin with, Mr. Toomey, and he goes over the top nuts as it goes on. But Stephen King's cameo in there is in like a hallucination or memory kind of thing that Toomey has, and he's like his boss kind of guy, and just kind of part of the thing, one of the things that Toomey hates, basically. Um, but yeah, it's a really, really interesting movie. I think it was hard for me to figure out what was going on the first time I saw it because I hadn't read the book. And the first time I saw it, it was very hard to figure out what was going on, which to me is a good thing. You know, if it didn't telegraph the ending at all, to me anyway.
Yeah, I remember that one. I like.
Well, I will say
Isn't it?
the one issue everybody has with that one is that it had very early CGI that was by
Yes.
today's
Okay.
standards really terrible. But I think it's sort of, I don't know, it's sort of artsy. It doesn't look realistic, but it's kind of an artsy little touch to it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. That's. It almost looked like little, in a way, kind of almost looked like little mouths that was opening
Yeah,
up in the
yeah,
runway type of.
yeah.
Uh,
And I
actually,
think
it probably
if
that's
you look
pretty
up
trippy.
Langoliers, I think you'll see pictures of it right there is like the cover pictures you'll see and stuff.
Right. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
Another one
Good
that I
movie
haven't seen.
series.
You don't realize Stephen King. I do Stephen King marathons once in a while, and I still I've seen nearly all the Stephen King movies.
There are
There's
so
you
many.
don't realize how many there are. There's really a lot.
Then again, he's a prolific writer, so I suppose there would be a lot of
Yes.
movies too.
I think also too is people just tend to stick with the more well-known ones and not really dive into the lesser-known ones. I mean,
Gotten to
you
the point
always,
where I started trying to delve deeper, but I still haven't hit some of the big ones like Langoliers. That's been on my list for a bit.
yeah, it's a good one. All right, well, for my last one, uh, from Vincent Price, he kind of goes a little bit more on, well, kind of staying within the horror sci-fi genre, but it's a little more action adventure oriented. Uh, in the United States, it was called War Gods of the Deep, but it was released elsewhere as City Under the Sea, which now that I've seen that title, I think I can prefer it because it, the other title sounds like it's this warring group of sea creatures that are going to come up, to take over the land, and it's just kind of a misrepresentation, I think. But it's basically it's a discovery of a lost city, and Price, he's a captain, and he and some of his sailors a century ago uh, were marooned under, and they went to that city. So they were living there, and they were living there agelessly. Um, and then this other group of people came down, and he kidnaps this girl, bring it down, because I think it's just a bunch of guys. So you know, and it has Tab Hunter in it, and I didn't know that until I started reading into it. I wasn't really paying attention too much to the credits. Especially this morning when I rewatched it, and um, I was kind of tied between this one and another one that was more adventure oriented, was Master of the World, which that's kind of one of his lesser known films because he didn't really do too many adventure stuff. But I wanted to stick with this one because this is the one that really, I mean, it's kind of taking cue from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea a little bit. He's kind of, I guess you would say, he's kind of playing a Captain Nemo type character,
That's
but
what I
instead
thought
of
describing it.
instead of him on a submarine, he's a stationary, and there is creatures that he's actually in a way exploiting to sustain him and his sailors' lives. But it's really a good one, and it comes from at the time right after I believe, because it was done in 1965, so it was one of his earlier 60s films, and I think it was the directors wanted to kind of capitalize using Vincent Price because he's been in all those Poe adaptations, and bring him in because he's really popular at that time. And this is a really good one. Like I said, I only found out about this maybe 15 or so years ago. I did when I was skimming through looking for Vincent Price movies to get, and I saw that, and I was like, going, okay, I'll get that one. I bought it blindly, and I was very happy I did, and it became, like I said, obviously it became one of my favorites.
May have found one of the few Vincent Price movies I have not seen. I have not seen it. I have seen Master of the World. That's he's kind of Captain Nemo with a hot air balloon, basically.
Yeah.
Essentially. But yeah, I've heard about it though, and I heard would make a good double feature with Master of the World.
Yes, yeah.
They have their similarities, but I have not actually seen that one. Now you're making me want to try and find that somewhere.
Well, it's on Amazon Prime.
Okay. Might have to snatch that.
And that is my final film. So it looks like we got another 15 films for people out there who, if they hadn't seen them, for them to go and seek out and enjoy. And if you have seen,
get out and enjoy finding these films, actually.
Yeah, and also too, I'm really curious if anybody does, if anybody wants to put down in the comment section their 5 favorite from a horror icon, and it doesn't matter what era it's from. It could be an actor, director, producer. Doesn't matter as long as it has to do with film. I'd be kind of curious to see what people will put down for their 5, and it's your favorites. It doesn't have to be the best ones out there. Well,
yeah, you know what? Let me say something else, Ron.
Sure.
Another thing we should do, if anybody wants to put in the comments some suggestions for future episodes. Remember, we always, each of us will pick 5 movies, but if you have some kind of a genre or a title that you would like to see us run with, why don't you put it in the comments? We may not do it, but we may.
Yeah, it'll probably get, if we don't do it exactly how you write it, we might get inspiration from it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Spooky Ventures. This should be interactive too. Comment on it. Tell us what you think. Get some conversations going about some of these movies we talk about.
Oh, yes. Yeah, because I'd be curious to see if anybody has seen any of these 15. And let us know if you have, and if they're your favorites or if they're not your favorites, All right, guys. Thanks again. We did another one. I believe this is number 12, which is pretty amazing. And
on a year, haven't we?
And we got Bill, Jerry, and myself, and we are the MovieNauts. Stay tuned next month, and this will be on the 3rd Friday, just like
lucky number 13.
The previous. Yes. So stay tuned for the episode. All right. Thanks again, guys.
All right.
It was fun.
Thank you very much for watching this episode. And stay tuned for the next one.